All right. So this is how brand journalists use story to get more traffic and clients. So this is great if you're a coach. This is great if you own a business, you're an entrepreneur, or this is great if you're just crafting your story. As you know, you're a personal brand, whether you work for a corporation or you work for yourself. So branding is always something important. One of the best ways to get your defining your brand is to write about it. And what I do is I write brand stories for people and get them massive traffic. So a lot of coaches like working with me. So who am I? My name is Arlie PEYTON. I like to go by PEYTON, just my last name. And I've helped dozens of seven-figure course creators, personal brands, and digital companies maximize their brand awareness and get traffic. That's like the number one thing, to get known, get traffic. I started this magazine called Viral Ventures Magazine back in 2009, and I've done a lot of digital marketing ever since. So that's a little bit about me. I've been published in a lot of places, and I write at this site called writingincomeaccelerator.com. The link is in the chat. That's my business. And I want to share with you a couple of points here. So there's some key statistics about branding and marketing. Is a well-told story can make consumers happy to consume ads. 92% of consumers want brands to make them feel like a story. So story is like super duper important. There's a lot of science, neuroscience behind that. And this 92% is kind of a big deal. Branded content is 22 times more engaging than display ads. Also, there's a lot of ad blockers out there on browsers. So people will see the story or the article, but they won't see the ads that people spend all this money on. A third stat interesting for this topic is SEO drives 1,000% plus more traffic than organic social media. So social media, Facebook, Instagram, all that's like super duper important. But SEO, what results come up in Google, that gives you massive traffic. So if you're a personal brand or a business or a C-suite executive trying to get known, this is really great. And we're all a personal brand, as we talked about. And then the last one is we are 22 times more likely to remember a fact when it has been wrapped in a story. This is by a doctor, a cognitive psychologist. So we know the power of story. I'm not here to to argue with anybody about that or not. I think everybody kind of agrees on that. That story is super duper powerful, and we just can't get enough of it. So let me tell you what brand journalism has done for me and my clients. So let's say that you're a coach or a personal brand, you sell something. I've gotten people massive amount. You can look at the stats here, but I've gotten people massive amounts of clicks to their landing page from a single article that I wrote for them. In one case, it resulted in $52,000 in client revenue. Direct links, you can see that as well on the next slide. I worked for this company called Oak, and Kevin Rose created that app, and I sent him over 2,300 clicks to his app website by writing a story that really wasn't about the product. Brand journalism is really not about product. It's about stories of a different hero. So we'll talk about that in a moment. And then, another very popular author, I gave them 3,000. I wrote an article that gave them 3,000 clicks to their site. And this is a client that I worked with last year. And this story is kind of the epitome of brand journalism for me, which I'll talk about in a moment. This is a story about a kid that, 19-year-old kid that basically he made millions, and he built 3 schools in Nepal with his money. Instead of buying a Maserati or a nice car or house, he gave a bunch of money away. And that was a really cool story to tell, rather than saying, here's my great company, I'm a great person, buy my stuff. Like, people don't want to hear that. They want to read that. They want a genuine, cool story. And so this is good brand journalism. And so here's what I'm going to take you through today. Before we get to the questions at the end, I'm going to tell you about Act 1, which is the hero and story. Act 2 will be the story structure for people and businesses, because you'll see that it's not the same as the regular hero's journey. And in Act 3 is how to apply the client hero story structure. If you're a personal brand, if you're a coach, if you're just somebody that's trying to be a careerist and create your story to tell. So Act 1 is the hero and story. And so here's what people get wrong all the time with brand journalism. So basically, you got a mix of journalism, you got a mix of branding, okay, and you're writing an article, you're telling a story. What people get wrong is the hero of that story is they often make it the brand or the product or the service. And people do not want to read about that. If you're on medium.com or HuffPo or BuzzFeed, any of these big news outlets, you don't want a giant infomercial or ad. So the hero is the protagonist, the main character, the focus, of course. But in school, that hero is the student. So I call that the student hero. In medicine, that hero is the patient. So I call that the patient hero. And in business, the customer hero. And I use customer and client interchangeably in case you're a coach. And in articles, if you're a writer, the reader is called the reader hero. Okay, in coaching arrangements, it's called the client or the client hero. So who is the ideal customer or ICP? ICP is ideal client profile. So once you know that the ideal person, okay, that becomes your hero. That's who you're writing the article to. Okay, so I have this slide presentation as a download, but I'm going to kind of skate through some of these. But what you have to do is figure out the types of heroes that you want to use. So brand journalists use about 5 different types of heroes, and I've got examples here. So the best ones are customer hero story. If you've ever seen those Microsoft commercials for their Surface notepad, and they have like the high school or middle school teacher, and they champion them, and they say, look at all the great things I do in my classroom because of the Microsoft Surface. That is a great customer hero story. And every viewer can kind of relate to that, even if they're not teachers. Okay, that's much better than other stories that come out to just focus on the product and tell you all the features and benefits. Those are boring. And the next one is the product hero story. And that is a thing when you do talk about the product, but you take a different spin on it. Again, brand journalism is lightly branding something, but really telling an interesting story about that. Product hero mixed with the customer hero. You also get the product hero with that Microsoft example I was giving you. But also you've seen it with like Nike shoes, where they talk about how the Nike Air was made. And just that little feature is kind of interesting to learn about. And you're not really saying this is the greatest shoe on the planet. We're talking about a feature. So sometimes those are really great stories to tell. Next up, you have the founder hero stories. So Steve Wozniak, Steve Jobs started in a garage in California, and they built this awesome company called Apple. So those are fun stories to read about. You see people that make the front page of Wired. Those are really great founder hero stories. One of my favorite stories to look at, one of the heroes that I like to hear about in a story is the employee hero, where somebody within the company actually has a very interesting story to tell that is going to bring you closer to the brand. I had the pleasure to meeting the billionaire Bob Miller. He came to one of my Portland State University classes I taught, and he literally told the students that he started off as a box boy and a bottle counter, and now he became the CEO of Albertsons, who back then, a few years ago, was just bought Safeway. So he just became the biggest grocer on the planet. So that was a really cool employee hero story, and it brought you closer to Albertson and what he was doing. And then lastly, you got the brand partner hero story. So this is somebody collaborating with the brand. And if you're a private person or a personal brand, this could be a JV, a joint venture partner. But somebody you connect with and you kind of tell your stories together, or just the other person's story, so you don't make it about you. Okay, so those are heroes that you can pick as a brand journalist. And so what I'm trying to say with all this is that we have to have better heroes. We're not just talking about the brand. Okay, so we've known this for a long time. The greatest companies in the world choose to make the customer or the client the hero. Okay, so there's still something wrong with the way we go about the story making, and we'll get into that. I won't go through all these steps, but we all know the hero's journey. We've learned that since we're in middle school or even earlier, and it goes through 12 distinct steps. If you watch Star Wars, you know that it hits every single one of them, and that is great for movies and telling your kids stories, okay? but that's too many steps. If I'm going to write an article about you and kind of tell the world about your brand, 12 steps is a lot to do in, say, 2,000 words. So it's too much. I've dwindled those 12 steps down to 7. And you kind of follow along here. You've got the character, you got a big problem or challenge you're trying to overcome. You have the guide. So that's like the yoga figure, the mentor, the guide. And then they go through trials, and then they have their low point. Something drastic happens, their lowest point, they almost give up. And then there's a showdown between the hero and the villain. We know this. And it's either going to be a good outcome or a bad outcome. They win or they lose in the end. So tragedy or comedy in Shakespearean terms. So we all know that. And we also know that the character moves, the hero moves from the ordinary world to the extraordinary world, or what I call the remarkable world. So that's just reviewed. That's nothing new to you. But here's the thing. If you're a coach, the hero and the guide relationship is really important, or the mentor relationship, right? So that's why I have this diagram right here. You are talking about the problem and you're trying to overcome that problem. So when committed heroes find the right guide, success is inevitable. And that's what we must do in business. Okay. So here's how traditional story fails people. So the hero's journey fails people in a business setting, because you're taking them to, if you have a guide, you know, that's like a coach, that's very useful. But a lot of people self-guide. They become their own mentor. They don't get outside help or a different perspective. And then they still try to do that. If you've ever tried to maintain a diet and failed, this thing should make sense. You go through this negative cycle, this negative narration. It's hard. You go through the trials all alone. You don't have that third person mentor, the objective mentor. So that's the negative narrative. And what you must go through is you get a real guide or a real mentor, and you have an epiphany, and you have this low point here where you figure out, hey, I can solve this. But where people in business make a mistake is they think they have to go through the trial and the low point with the client. If you're hiring a coach, you should not go through that low point. That should have happened before the call happened. And so that's where kind of people mess up with their stories sometimes. And I'll get more into this in a little bit. Here's Act 2, story structure and clients in business. So the hero's journey doesn't work when I'm writing stories or telling brand stories. Here's what it does. Okay, so here's the ideal story structure. You have the customer, hero, and setting. You have the big problem, and then you have the guide. So we know that, but you're going to bypass the trials. You're going to bypass the low point with your client and just go to the showdown. Confront the big challenge and in a positive outcome instead of like heartbreak or a bad outcome. That is what a good coach does. That is what a good story does. And that's the story that you want to tell. And that's just the kind of people that you want to help get them through this kind of story. Okay, so customer, hero, story structure. So we have the story structure kind of revolves around understanding the customer pain through learning the customer's backstory and who they are as a character. And this is really going to help you write that story. Like I said, going back to the beginning, I've written these stories for clients where they came from nothing and became something. And that has garnered thousands and thousands of hits, which turned into thousands and thousands of dollars in revenue. So you really got to get in the backstory. And sometimes I've said to clients, there's not really a story here. So I don't write that story and I don't make any money. But I'm asking for a really good story. I mean, are you like a heroic figure? And so the goal is to help the client hero feel more transformed. That's why mentors do what they do, what coaches do what they do. And so here's a little thing that I can give you. And in the chat, I have a URL. You can find this on the site. And it's how you find your stories. If you're asking, how do you even come up with any of this? I have an ad lib that you just fill in the blanks, and it'll help you write your brand story. Or if you're trying to write a long form article to rank in Google, this is how you do it. And here's an example. We'll skip over that because we're kind of the time. I'm obeying the time here. Act 3 is how to apply the client hero story structure. So we talked about what works in story, what doesn't, and I'm going to show you how to apply it. I have 5 steps, and we're going to kind of race through these because I want people to ask questions at the end. But number 1 is you pick a marketing goal. So what are the metrics? Do you want 200 email opt-ins? Do you want 6,000 visits to a landing page to get them in your email nurture sequence? What is your marketing goal? Articles are top of funnel. Okay, there's 3 phases of funnel. And number 2 is pick an audience. So the reader hero is the ICP, ideal customer. So the reader hero, what does my exact target audience and their world look like? So I'm trying to get into the mind of somebody who's reading the article. I'm going to lightly brand it with my client's work, but I need to know how they think and feel and all that. Okay, number 3 is pick a villain. So the villain, this is easy. The villain is the pain. Your ideal customer or ideal reader, that is the pain that they're going through, these things that keep them up at night. And my client or the brand is the solution, okay? And then number 4 is pick a hero. So I gave you 5 heroes in the beginning, like the customer hero and all that, the brand partner. You just choose the hero, and then we're going to wrap an article around that whole concept. And so that's kind of, there's a hero in the actual story, and then the brand is the mentor, and the author is a mentor as well. And then you pick a brand narrative. So the difference between stories and a narrative is a narrative is just what you want others to see. So we hear a lot about like this fake news and stuff lately. It's whatever spin that magazine or newspaper has, and they're just kind of saying, giving you the narrative. And so brands get to choose which narrative they want. So what brand story do you want to tell? So here's the summary, in case you're joining in late here. Here's what customers wish their story looked like. They come to a scene, and the hero just wants a straight line to a good outcome. That usually never happens. And then here's what other marketers think it looks like. And then that's basically the hero's journey, that you have to take the customer through all these different 12 steps, or in the article, you have to cover all these different 12 steps. And that's just too much. That's going to be, a book when you're done. And then here's what at the bottom is what the customer hero and reader hero want. And it's basically after the reader or the hero meets their guide, their mentor, they streamline them to a victory. Okay, so that's what that looks like. And that's what great coaches do with their clients. Okay, so here's my checklist. And this is a part of the download as well, is have you made your customer the hero in the story? Have you identified the biggest problems of your ideal customer hero? Have you clearly demonstrated that I'm the ideal mentor of their story? This is the brand talking. I have the skills to help the hero take on the challenge or showdown. I've planned another transformational victory for the customer hero. So that's the checklist that you're going through as you write the article, or if you're writing copy for your website about who you are as a coach, or maybe you're looking at getting coaching, and then you should look at this checklist and say, hey, does this coach do these things? Because I want a transformation because I'm paying this person a lot of money for coaching. So that's a great checklist to use. And that is the end. Okay, so I have this 34-page thing, a presentation. I've added 10 more pages, some worksheet pages, some checklists. All you got to do is go to this website, writingincomeaccelerator.com, /momentum 2021, download it, and you'll get all the worksheets and all that stuff. Now I'm going to take your questions and go over anything you might have. So that concludes that. Let me stop sharing here. Okay, so I'm just going to hang out in a chat and answer any questions that you might have about brand stories or any results you want to talk to me about, any of that. So I'm just going to hang out, and we've got about 7-8 minutes left. Okay. Chat. What about? Well, okay, I see your question, Jennifer. I'll answer that one first. Oh, do you skip over the turning point or go straight to the showdown? I think that helps sell the brand, right? So yeah, I would in the storytelling you can in literature they have in medias res, which means in the middle of things, of course, and all like great books and great movies start with you're in the middle of things, like something like blows up and then the scene starts and the characters come in. And so that can be a turning point as well. And sometimes to write a good story, that's how you hook them in. So you can start from that turning point if you want, but eventually you have to introduce the hero, introduce the mentor, introduce the problem, and then scale up to that challenge. So that's just like really good storytelling. And I didn't include all the literary terms, but yeah, that's the funny thing is people and brand marketers all the time, they're saying, yeah, it's all about storytelling. And they don't really tell you how to tell that story. So I just gave you 5 steps. If you follow those steps, you'll write a good brand story. And yeah, turning point's definitely part of it. Okay. That was a great question. Any other questions as we have a few minutes left here? Yeah, I will show you the 5 steps and then you can screenshot it. But you can also go up to the chat where the chat starts, and I have all the slides for you as well. So let me show that to you real quick. Let's see, application window. So the 5 steps. So pick a marketing goal, pick an audience, pick a villain, pick a hero, and pick a brand narrative. I don't know if I went through that too fast. I'll go over it again. Marketing goal, audience, villain, hero, and brand narrative. So yeah, I didn't get all of them in the final. Oh, the final checklist. Oh, okay. Yeah. So download my thing. So that's free. You get the whole slide thing, but I'll show that to you real quickly since not a whole lot of people are here. But here's the checklist. This is probably what you're talking about, right? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. So, whoops. So here's the checklist. So, yeah, if you're a personal brand, this is what I would go through. If you're a company, if you're a SaaS company, this is what I go through. And I think one of the biggest ones is right here, the showdown, is that you look at your ideal client profile, like your ideal client that you'd like to acquire as a customer, and you basically ask them what's keeping them up at night. What do they need solved? And then you can write a whole story, an article around that. Okay. So one of my clients owns a social media agency, and he's like, my clients have nightmares about getting their next business client. And so I write a whole story around that. Okay. So let's stop sharing. I hope that helps. But like I said, it's really easy to write brand stories. Okay. It's different from a regular story or article because you're only lightly branding and you're telling a story from a customer's point of view or a customer's inquiry. And then I think that's going to resonate more with an audience. Yeah. Link. Yeah. So I will give you the link here one more time. It's above in the very beginning of the chat, but let's see. Let me just. It's gonna be momentum. Okay, so here is the actual link. And you click that, and I will send you through email the slides, and there's about 40 slides. It's the expanded version because I had to skate through a lot of this because this is an hour-long lecture that I try to get done in 20 minutes. So hopefully that helps. And I go into great detail of what's going on there. So Okay, any other questions here? I'd love to know if anybody here is a coach or is an entrepreneur. Let me know, because that's the funnest project to do. Whether you write it for yourselves or you get it written for you, that is just, I think brands have stories to tell, and people want to hear them. It's just they're too busy kind of telling people how great their stuff is and not really listening to the customer and telling a story that they want to hear. So anyhow. Executives. So yeah, I write blog posts and content for C-suite executives. I have an ND, which is non-disclosure agreement. So everybody thinks that the executives write it, but I gave them this worksheet and I said, what is your story? What are you trying to do in your career? What are you trying to create? And so I go into their personal branding, and they want to eventually leave a company sometimes and move on and create their own business. And so they have to tell their founder's story. And so one of the heroes was the hero founder, or founder hero. And I interview them for an hour and get that. Okay. And on their personal website, the copywriting, there's some storytelling going on there. But maybe I write an article about them, the beginning of their company, or something that they're doing that's interesting with their company. And that could be a great brand journalism piece. And, if it's over 2,000 words and you do all the easy SEO things, that will rank to the top of Google, which is what they want. But I think executives that have ties in with philanthropy and associate themselves to that is great for brand journalism. So if you support the Gene Komen breast cancer awareness program, you can tie that in with what you do. If you volunteer, you can tie that in. If you helped out a client, you could help tell their brand story and be associated with it. And that way you don't look like the executive that's always talking about themselves. You can champion someone else, but be connected to it, kind of like, a satellite. So that's a really great way to do things. Also, there's executives that write books, and you need personal branding for that. So definitely create your own website if you don't already have one. Start blogging on it and do your bio, tell your brief story in under 300 words. And then maybe get like a medium.com account and start posting some of your ideas and get comfortable with your voice. But there are so many CEOs out there that I wish wrote, because there's a lot to learn from them. And it's not vain to share your expertise.